afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl. I work at AppLovin. We're a platform that focuses on connecting game developers with users around the world. We're mainly at first an ad network, one of the largest ad networks in the market focused on gaming specifically. At the same time, we're also a gaming publisher. Our publishing studio is called Lion Studios. We've had a number of larger successes such as Happy Glass, Hooked, for example, and Love Balls, that some of you may have heard. And I'm here with Vincent from Homa Games. Vincent, tell me a little about yourself.
Hi, Carl. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Vincent. In terms of background, I come from user acquisition and monetization at BitMotion mainly. And 7 months ago, we decided to launch our own mobile game publishing company called Homa Games. And in the past 7 months, we launched 7 games. And recently, like 2 of them have reached the top charts. So it's pretty good news and pretty good start.
Nice. Yeah, you guys have, their most recent success was Tiny Cars, but we'll dive into that in a second. Today, we want to talk a little bit about what could drive hyper-casual success in 2019. I'm not sure how many of you here are developers, but we all know hyper-casual is the buzzword of the year, or at least over the last 2 years. And I've been with AppLovin for 4.5 years. AppLovin is the central player in the hyper-casual market. He runs his own hyper-casual publishing studio. We want to have a little chat about what we believe are the main drivers of success going forward. We want to instill a point of sort of you guys knowing what we think from our vantage point is what drives success. And to that, I think from a higher business perspective, what's important to know is, and a lot of you know, hyper-casual is a very, very competitive space. So maybe, Vincent, how about you start a little, what kind of games you focus on? What does Homa Games focus on?
Yeah, right now, so we focus on hyper-casual games. We did a bit of idle games, but right now the focus is really on hyper-casual. I think you mentioned something interesting. It's getting more and more competitive, this industry. Many players are now launching their own mobile game publishing business. And I think not only we see more and more players, but I think we compete against the best. When I see what people do in user acquisition and monetization in hyper-casual games, it's way more advanced than like what other apps are doing. So to be successful right now, you really need to stand out. So either you're lucky, you put like your first 3 games in the top charts, or you need a different approach. And that's what we did initially at Homa Games. We want to work differently with the developers. So we are fully transparent with the gaming studios we work with, meaning that usually what we see, they will see as well. We want really to work extremely closely and be transparent with them. That's the difference.
Yes. I think, as you said, is very competitive. You know, we've got publishers like Voodoo, we've got publishers like Good Job Games dominating the charts. What are your biggest games right now? Just briefly.
So right now, Tiny Cars is our biggest game. It was like number 3 recently. It's still in the top 20, and working really well. And it's the first out of many, I hope.
Nice. It's doing very well. Definitely worth checking it out. I think the idea we're going to talk about a little is as the space is very competitive. There's a lot of talk these days about what drives the success of companies like Voodoo. What drives your success? What drives the success of Good Job Games and so on that are the main dominant players on the charts? And we wonder sort of. We talked a little about what is that we want to focus on, and I think there at the heart of it all is a culture of testing. Maybe we want to start about that.
Absolutely. I think the success of hyper-casual games today is actually not related to hyper-casual games, but to a different approach, to a different method of working. If we look back, and I will exaggerate a little bit, we used to have gaming studios who developed a game blindly. They worked on a game for 6 months, and after 6 months, they tested it out on the market, and they tried to see the reaction of the users. Today, we do things really, it's the opposite today. Today, as soon as we have a prototype, we test it with real users. And we will test everything, every time during the whole process. And we will invest time and money, like resources and money, only when we know that we will win. And this approach is completely different. So it's really a culture of prototyping, but then being able to invest massively and execute extremely quickly. So I think this approach, like testing all the time, measuring everything, and then taking fast reaction and being able to execute quickly, that's the reason why it's successful today.
And to give you an idea of sort of what I see with other major publishers, publishers test at this point hundreds of hyper-casual games a month, hundreds. Obviously, and they're willing to, nobody's attached to their games anymore. There's no special love for any games. The key is test, throw it out if it doesn't work, and test some more. Try new stuff constantly.
Exactly. Yeah. Right now we test like up to 10 days a day, per day. It's crazy. But I think like this method is really what makes it successful. And today we apply it to hyper-casual games because the lifetimes are really short. And you can very quickly measure the LTV of a user. So those type of games work really well with this approach. But tomorrow, who knows? Maybe another type of product.
I think, and Tone, and what you just said, I think this is an approach we want to bestow on the world. This is an approach that should apply to all gaming. Before, as I said, people might test a game or work on a game for 6 months, a year, without ever having tested the scalability. So what I always tell my partners, my game developing partners, is you need to focus on your testing when you speak about the product only. You test the scalability of the game. Is a game marketable? I genuinely believe that every single person should, from the start, figure out a marketability test. Will users connect with the game you want to bring to product, you want to bring to market? At the same time, the other effect is start testing retention early. Start using analytics intelligently to test test quality of your game. So once you have something that's marketable, obviously you have to make a great game out of this. And this is a culture that should apply to genres above hyper-casual and across all genres, I believe. Yeah, I think. On that, sort of, ultimately, we want to see what we see when I mentioned hundreds of games, testing hundreds of games. What we see a lot is this idea is once you've finished with testing, once you found out a game is marketable, you found out the retention is good, there has to be a go big or go home approach to hyper casual. If you find something that has good metrics, that has strong, that you can scale at a CPI of, let's say, less than 50 cents, something that has retention numbers, some numbers Voodoo, for example, published, has retention numbers of 50% day one, or in that region, then you know you have a hit at your hands, or a potential hit at your hands, and you have to go big.
Yeah, and the numbers you said, like 50 cents CPI, it's possible to have a game in the top 3 with these CPIs, US, iOS.
I think this is something what I found with a lot of indies that we've been working with. There's a strong belief across many that, I don't know where people take their numbers, that you need multiple dollars as a CPI in order to scale a game. That is not true. Between platforms like ours and AppLovin, Facebook, and so on, you can scale games for less than 50 cents and get to the top charts with that.
Maybe in the room there are gaming developers who have such games that have this potential. Maybe you don't know it yet.
Exactly. Do test it, have the testing process of testing games, testing the marketability on platforms like Facebook or any marketing platform. Test that early, see if you can bring it to market. If you have a great game that retains incredibly, but nobody's going to download it, you're screwed. So this is something you can solve and have through a culture of prototyping, get very successful with. I think beyond that, like sort of from going a little more specifically, or from the testing, and this is, both Vincent and I have a background in mobile marketing. I've been with AppLovin for multiple years and in the space for 6 years. Vincent also has a strong marketing background. I think we can go a little technical on what we believe are sort of the key drivers for growth in hyper-casual. That's what we believe is generally what anybody should focus on this year. But yeah, Vincent, maybe a little bit of your background there.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, so I come from user acquisition with BitMotion, and actually this really helps us to be able to bring a game in the top 3 with CPIs at 50 cents. And I think there is no like magic here, but it's roughly the same approach as what we have with the hyper casual games overall. It's mainly testing, then measuring everything and taking fast action. So when we say testing, it's like starting to buy on every available channel. So Snapchat, AppLovin, Facebook, BitMotion, Twitter, anything. Try everything. Then try many creatives, not like 10 new creatives per day in every format. You need to think about the rewarded videos, so they need to be roughly 25-second videos. You need to think about the interstitials with 14-second videos. You need to think about the banners, the playable ads, the end cards, GIF end cards, banner end cards. Test absolutely everything. So this takes a lot of resources to build like all the videos and all the materials, but you will never know in advance what works or what doesn't work and on which channels. Also, don't consider a channel dead because you made a test one day and it didn't work. Users are evolving, channels are evolving. So right now we are testing TikTok. Maybe it will be like completely crazy for us in a couple of months. Same as Snapchat like 2 years ago was not really useful. So really test everything, and inside all of those channels, be extremely precise and look at what happens inside each channel, meaning like all the sub-sources. If you buy traffic on AppLovin, for instance, you will actually buy traffic in like hundreds of different apps. You need to consider each of those apps separately. And that's the second part. You need to measure everything. So you need to test, and then you need to measure everything. I've heard a lot that there are some good and bad users. That's not the right approach. You have value for each user, and then a right price of acquisition for each user. But if you don't know this value, if you don't know the price, then as a UA manager, you're screwed. You cannot buy. So you need to be able to measure absolutely everything, to know exactly what is the value of the users you get through a specific subsource with a specific creative on a specific channel. When you know that, you can buy them at the right price and then like optimize the volume you can get and still be profitable.
I think on a higher level here, just before diving back into it, I think it's important as a game developer that you have to appreciate that you have to have somebody whose job it is full-time, one of your partners, who's either a partner in your team or somebody you hire. You have to have somebody who does this full-time, I believe. Because the amount of work that goes into testing all these platforms, communicating with all these partners, communicating with all your partners to help you then explain how these platforms work. I don't expect anybody to know how Facebook, how AppLovin works, but people need to talk to us, and we'll help them set them, get set up, show them how a platform works, and then give them the tools in order to start optimizing their campaigns themselves and sort of setting up their Facebook properly in order to scale. But yeah, it's the main thing we see when you, for example, you mentioned creatives. What everybody has to understand that is everything is an auction in the mobile marketing sphere, and your auction usually is defined by the price point you're willing to pay on our platforms, the CPI, the click-through rate, and the install rate. And those are three variables that you can focus on. A lot of the time, price, CPI, is a difficult variable because you can't pay a lot more, or you can't pay more than you'll make with the user. However, the click-through rate is one of the things you influence the most. And that's where the creative process should be an essential part. Now, I mean, this is something that's been known for a long time, but in order to be successful in hyper-casual, test creatives like it is your job. We have people who have tried thousands of creatives on all different platforms. Different creatives work on different platforms well. Sometimes the Facebook creatives can need to be a little more clickbaity, Sometimes the creatives on networks need to be longer. You have more possibilities to show the game. You mentioned, for example, rewarded video and video interstitials as formats. What you have to appreciate is that something like a rewarded video integration is a great way to showcase an entire game. So as a result, even in the creative testing process for your video, for your graphic assets, consider that you have 30 seconds to showcase your entire title. You can show a lot more than in a Facebook ad where you have the attention of, you have half a second of users' attention. In a rewarded video, you can showcase other parts that could in turn then drive higher install rates and thus get your users into your game.
And just one thing you said about click-through rate. I want to talk quickly about playable ads. Because playable ads, so we hear a lot, like, well, playable ads is great. And yes, they are, because they will increase the click-through rates. And let me give you an example of one of the campaigns we did for Tiny Cars. When we started to use playable ads, the eCPM of the creatives went from roughly $20, I'm still talking like US, iOS, from $20 to above 25. And because the click-through rates increased. And suddenly, bam, we were on top of the waterfalls of all the apps we were buying on, and it's more than doubled the volume that we got from the user acquisition with the same CPIs. So just by changing the creative, just by like implementing new playable ads, we managed to double the scale of the campaigns at the same CPI. So this format, like the playables, is extremely useful, not really to reduce the CPI, but
to access, exactly.
Yeah, to get a bigger scale, to access like more quality inventory.
I think here on this, like, playables are a big buzzword right now, and what you need to understand, everybody talks about playables, and what we've seen with playables is, as using the example he just gave, a playable will allow you to access more scale. It'll make you at similar CPIs, and drive your click-through rates and drive your install rates. You can showcase your title to a user. The user gets more excited, more inclined to play, and as a result, your CPM is a little more competitive. However, what I want to bestow on everybody here is playables are not a fundamental game changer. What needs to be part of everybody's hyper-casual game testing, prototype testing, or the marketability testing of hyper-casual games, you need to make it work with a video. If something doesn't work with a video, don't think that a playable will make it work. If you have shitty click-through rates on a video, then it will not be it won't be a difference in night and day with a playable. So keep that in mind. I think playables are a buzz. There are a lot of people selling playable ads as a singular business to help you to change your business fundamentally. They're hugely important, but they're not game changing. Leading into playables, though, I think as we always say, it's two sides of the same coin. We want to talk a little about monetization. What you, just as much as marketing is an integral part of making these games grow these days, so is ad monetization. When you look at hyper-casual games, I think it's pretty self-evident. They make 90% plus of their revenue through ads. As a result, if you make all your money through ads, you're an ad revenue-driven business model, which means you need to understand how ads work, how you're showing ads, what you're doing in order to maximize the ad revenue you're getting in your games. That's when it starts. We mentioned about different types of ad formats. Have banners, have interstitials, figure out intelligent rewarded video integrations. Try this stuff out and maximize your ad revenue. At the same time, you need to build out. You need to look at mediations. Figure out how to maximize the revenues you have. To give you a little idea, we talk with every major hyper-casual developer. Vincent and our team argue almost on a daily basis.
Hey, Tony.
Hey, Tony. They negotiate constantly. So everybody we know in the hyper-casual space at this point works with structured waterfalls, where you call networks as many times as possible. I call this manual header bidding, because sadly we're not in the header bidding world yet. But you set up as many, you try to get as many bids from networks as possible, and you negotiate with networks.
Yeah, here again you need to test all the available networks, and as in user acquisition, you need to change the bid almost every day for every subsource of every channel. On the monetization side, you need to change the waterfall almost on a daily basis as well. Because the value you will get, the ECPM you will get from the different networks will change from one day to the other. So measure it constantly and adapt it quickly. So of course, like considering the huge amount of volume it represents, it's better to have like technologies that can help on the automation of this process.
And yeah, communicate with networks it's absolutely essential for what you want to achieve in hyper-casual games. They will not only help you with obviously the advertising, but also with the monetization. You can get guidance from the networks on how to maximize your revenue. You can negotiate with networks in order to maximize your revenue in general as well. Now, going beyond that, labored the whole thing. We've labored monetization and user acquisition. This is where we have a lot of expertise. Do you think any game can be successful?
No, no. Even with the best UA manager and best monetization manager, if you don't have a good game, you're screwed. That's why we work a lot on the games that we receive. We work a lot with the gaming studios. Actually, if we look at our 2 top games,
you give any guidance to your developers as well?
Not only we give guidance, a lot of guidance, but we also bring the concepts sometimes. It's the case for Tiny Cars, it's the case for Ball vs. Laser. So we have a pool of developers that we really like, and then every week we send them new game ideas. But then usually when we receive a game, we will work very, very closely with the developer. They are more like the artist, and we bring a layer of science on top of that, because we have the experience of the market, we identify the trends, we know what works well, what doesn't work, and we know the techniques to improve the retention rates, to increase the number of impression per session for rewarded videos, for interstitials, for banners. So we'll implement all of that. So when we have a game, we measure absolutely everything, and then we take actions again.
Can you give any specific examples of that?
Yes, absolutely. Let's take the example of Ball vs. Laser. Using tools like Game Analytics, we identified that we had a huge drop in retention when a user reached level 10. So, okay, what's going on level 10? We made a couple of hypotheses, and one of them was that the user starts to get bored because there is nothing really new after that. So we tested with 25 new players that we watched. We watched them playing the games, and we said, okay, yeah, probably they are bored. So what we did is that we completely changed the level design, and we made sure that every user got something new every 2 levels. And it actually doubled the session time, and it almost doubled the number of impressions per session.
Yes. Again, leads back to the testing thing that we want to bestow on people. Test, look at the data. I think it was something you just said. It's a balance of art and science. So we, in the advertising space, we talk about data-driven business models a lot, but obviously to find these, data can help you find the problems you might have, level 10 problem you just mentioned, but at the same time, then it requires creative minds to figure out how to solve these problems.
Yeah. But here you need a really good team of game designers. It happens several times that we received a game that had a retention rate day one below 40% without ads, and after working on it for 2 weeks, it was above 50% with ads. So it's really worth it.
On that point, one thing I want to say is, a lot of the tricks to improve retention, for example, are not secrets. You look into the top 10, look into the top 20, look into the most successful games these days, and see what retention loops they have, see what tricks others use to solve your problems for you. But yeah, it's not that hard to figure it out. There's a lot of great games out there that are very successful. Yes. That's I think overall what we want to bring across, the main points we had. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any ideas we would like to